Mental health is always important to talk about, but especially during this time when we're all quarantined and stuck at home and the weather is getting darker and colder, there might be some days where everything just feels a little bit off. I've had one of those days. In fact, I've kind of had one of those weeks. I had a lot of projects accumulate in my classes. My semester is kind of gearing down. I feel like all my classes get harder as the semester ends. I realized that some topics that I kind of skimmed over, then I kind of didn't really learn as well as I should have. It's coming back to bite me in the butt, so I'm having to put in extra efforts and relearn it. And in all of that, my animal care has definitely suffered. The rabbit room has been very, very neglected. The sugar glider cage looks okay because it's a little bit bigger, so it doesn't accumulate mess that fast, but it definitely needs a revamp, and I just wanted to show you guys. Whenever I show any messy enclosures or something, I always have people comment that I should clean my rabbit cage and that I'm a terrible owner. And I think that's honestly disgusting. For one, I think a lot of people commenting this are people who actually don't have rabbits or these animals. I know that when I used to watch rabbit YouTubers before I got my animals, I didn't understand why things always wouldn't look spotless because I wanted a rabbit so badly that I didn't understand why someone could have a rabbit, which is my dream pet, and not take care of them to the best extent. But the fact is, when you have an animal and you're doing stuff for them every single day, some days are just off and you can't do it. Okay, so this is phase one of me getting my life together. It's Monday right now. I have 3 days of school this week, and then I'm off on Thursday for Thanksgiving, and I'm off on Friday, but I still have some assignments due, which sucks. Everyone's like, Thanksgiving's on Thursday, so we're gonna move stuff being due to Friday, but how am I supposed to have something due Friday and get it done unless I'm working on Thanksgiving? You know what I mean? Ugh, classes suck, man. It's also 1 a.m., so I'm going to do as much as I can right now, and then I'm going to go to bed because I have an 8 a.m. tomorrow, so gosh, pray for me, guys. Just 2 more days. Okay, so I kind of did like an 80% clean, and that's what my first tip is when you have really bad mental health, but you still want to take care of your pets. I'm one of those people where if I can't do something properly, I'd rather not do it at all. That's why I procrastinate on every single one of my assignments, because if I know that I'm not going to do something to the quality I want to do it, I would rather just not start it. But that mentality is absolutely toxic, and sometimes doing 80% is better than doing 0. Actually, not sometimes. Doing something is always better than doing nothing. So even if you can just clean a really small portion of the cage, or even if you can just scoop out a little bit of the litter box, that's something, and do it. Also, I think a lot of people go overboard when it comes to cleaning their animals' enclosures. For the most part, we keep things clean because it's easier for us to maintain, but the animals really don't mind either way. There are some things that are obviously hygiene issues. For example, a litter box being clean is not a matter of preference. It's something that your rabbits need because of how sensitive their respiratory systems are. So you need to watch for things like that. But things like having the room be clear of poops, of course that's helpful. You really don't want your rabbit in something that's super filthy. But at the end of the day, if you have to go a couple extra days without cleaning it, it's fine. Another thing to consider is the actual size of your enclosure. For me personally, when I'm having some pretty bad mental health days, I prefer to expand my animal's enclosure. For one, it just makes me feel less guilty to know that they have more space. When my mental health is off, I usually am not spending as much time with them and doing as much enriching stuff. So just giving them more space to play around is really helpful. And bigger spaces take longer to get messy. For example, I haven't touched a sugar glider cage in like 2 weeks, and it still looks pretty good. I can probably go an extra 2 or 3 weeks without really messing with it, just because of how large it is. At the same time, oh my god, my dog is literally in their litter box. Coco! What I was saying is, at the same time, more elaborate enclosures do take longer to clean and they can feel more overwhelming. So sometimes simplifying your animal's enclosure down, if that means you can keep up with it, then that's what I'd recommend. Also, decluttering your setup can also be a huge help. I know for rabbits especially, the more things you have in the setup, the more difficult it can be to clean around it. So sometimes just removing a few things makes it a little bit easier. Another thing that's important to consider is what your animal actually needs and what things that they can go without. For example, I really like to change out my rabbit's water 2 times a day, but sometimes that just isn't doable and I aim for 1. And honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world if they have to go 2 days with the same water. Also, if you're someone who struggles with mental health a lot, It's really great to put in systems that can be helpful over time. For example, for days when I really just can't change out the water, I actually have this water fountain, which I still like to provide fresh water twice a day when I can. But this fresh water is so much better than just having stale water that's been sitting out for a couple of days. Another thing with systems is do stuff that works for your animal. For example, having a water bowl right near the litter box might be really convenient for them because they can have a big chunk of hay and have a big drink of water, but it usually means that the water bowl is going to be filled with poops. So if you just have been feeling really off for a couple of days, moving the water bowl away from their litter box area or the messiest area of the room can be super helpful. Also, it's okay to cheat on a few things. For example, water bottles, I wouldn't recommend them for rabbits and I wouldn't say that they're ideal, but having some form of fresh water is better than none. So if you want to add an extra water bowl for days where you honestly just can't get out of bed and change the water, I think that's great. Another thing you can do is maybe if you can't scoop out the litter, you can add a little bit of fresh litter on top. This does help to minimize the smell. Of course, all the bacteria is still there, so you do want to be cleaning it out when you can. But just putting a little bit more litter on top is going to help with the odor control and help your rabbit's respiratory systems. Another thing I like to do is set myself up for success. On days or weeks when my mental health is really off, I always like to overfeed food a little bit. I normally am really particular about the amounts that I feed because I really don't want them to overeat, because once they overeat, they not only get overweight, but they usually get a little bit more picky. But for days when my mental health just isn't the greatest, for the sugar gliders especially, when sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to get down to the room and feed them, I always give them a little bit of extra food every day, even though some of it is going to waste, which makes me feel really bad. It's better that they have something to eat the next day and they're a little bit extra full if I can't get around to it for a couple hours. And in saying that, ask for help. I feel like there's a lot of shame when it comes to motherhood and pet ownership and admitting that you can't do something because it's almost like you chose this life. But honestly, if you're having a couple of weeks, it never hurts to ask someone for help and let them know how you're doing. Sometimes hiring a pet sitter or having a friend come over to watch your animals if you really just don't want to be bothered with them can be so helpful. I know I personally always ask my family for help on days where I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't think I fed my dog for like the past month because I've just been so overwhelmed with other things. So thankfully my mom and dad have been doing that, which is so helpful and it makes me feel so relieved. And my last point is don't be too hard on yourself. Don't feel guilty. I know, especially if you're watching a lot of YouTubers, it can seem like their pet care is perfect all the time, and I promise you it's not. Even if it is, they live a completely different life from you and you don't know what their circumstances are. Chances are they're making a lot more money than you and they have a lot more time to do things. So don't feel too guilty if someone can clean their rabbits out every single day and have a spotless enclosure, whereas you can only get to it once a week. Also, I do just want to touch on rehoming for a little bit because it's very stigmatized in the pet community. I honestly don't think that anyone should be guilted or shamed over rehoming an animal. At the end of the day, rehoming is really just an act of service to your pet, and it can often be one of the last kind things you can do for them. I would much rather someone rehome a pet before they neglect or abuse them. But at the same time, just because you've had a couple of bad mental health days or even a couple of weeks, it doesn't mean that you should feel obligated to give up your pet. At the end of the day, we all do the best that we can, and sometimes our best is better than other times. So just do what you can. Just because your pets have had less than perfect fare for a couple of days doesn't mean that you have to get rid of your animal immediately. Also, I think rescues and shelters are a great option if you need to utilize them, but I really do think that they should be a last resort because when you're surrendering your animal to something like that, you really don't know what type of situation they're going to, and sometimes it can be worse than what you're giving them. Okay, so that was just, I love it when Sachin sits on a chair. I feel like he literally looks like a human being. It's adorable. But I hope you guys enjoyed the little chat about owning pets and mental health. I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts on it are. Excuse me. Excuse me. He's chewing my shoe. Also, how do your animals affect your mental health? I know for me personally, they do a lot to help it. They feel like they give me a lot of perspective because when you're a teenager and something happens, it kind of can feel like the world is ending. And it's nice to just come into my pet room and know that that's not the case. I still have all these little furry critters that love me and are obsessed with me. Or maybe they're not obsessed with me. Maybe they're just obsessed with food. But it seems like they care about me to some extent. But at the same time, I think a lot of mental health problems can be exacerbated when you have animals because all of a sudden it's not just yourself that you have to wake up in the morning and clothe and shower. It's also like a living being that you're fully responsible for. And I think that can be really overwhelming, especially if you don't have someone to fall back on and help you. So just do your best. You guys are doing a good job. What you're doing is enough. We can't all be perfect pet owners 100% of the time. We just do the best that we can, and what you're doing, again, is enough. So don't beat yourself about it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Mental health and animals is so important to talk about, but I haven't really seen that many people address it, so let's get a conversation going. Okay, I'm gonna say bye. My 3 rabbits. That's the third one. My 3 rabbits are gonna say bye. Bye! Also, this is so random, but this is why I don't advocate for rabbits interacting with other pets. Coco, as you can see, is really excited. Sachin is not viewing that as excitement. Sachin is kind of actually looking a little bit threatened by Coco. And if someone didn't know this body language of a rabbit, he kind of looks like he's comfortable, but Sachin is really... Come here. It's just me. Do you guys see that? Ooh, this is why we don't encourage interspecies interactions. Huh. It can seem like things are going well until they're not. So yeah, just because you guys see me do it, please don't follow. This is one of those things where it's do as I say, not as I do. Come on, Coco. My dog is really well trained. I know my rabbits really well, but they are definitely having a moment right now. Huh. Coco, come on, we gotta go.